Hello there, and this one is called Kilthotic Experiences and Plant Medicines. So some time ago, back in the 20th century, a very popular thing for people to do was to take LSD. And when they took LSD, they knew there was a possibility they would have what they would call either a good trip or a bad trip. So that's worth bearing in mind. And when we look at plant medicines, people are aware that we have an experience and it is what it is. Very much the attitude towards all people involving work with plant medicines, whether this be ayahuasca or wachuma or whatever plant medicine it happens to be. So here's the thing. You can get two people going along to a retreat. I think of a particular friend of mine who's a shaman. She went along with a friend to a retreat and they were going to be drinking the brown plant medicine, the ayahuasca from the Amazon, and they had completely different experiences. So my friend was very much bathed in the light and had a wonderful time and had all sorts of delightful visions and experiences. She totally loved every moment of it. And her friend felt as if she'd been propelled into what she would call the hell realms, and it was just an ordeal for her and she was simply waiting for it to finish. So let's see where we can go with Kilthotic experiences with regard to these common situations people talk about. And there's one more I'd like to give you as well. Very rarely you get a person who will have the plant medicine and afterwards they're not the same. And they are clearly in a disturbed state of being, and sometimes you'll find these very hysterical posts on Facebook groups like ayahuasca, for example, and it's like, oh, this is a terrible plant, you shouldn't have anything to do with it. This person's been suffering from all these conditions ever since, and months have gone by and nothing seems to help. So really what I'm going to do is to address the question, what is going on here with people? So the simple answer is, if a person has a challenging experience with a plant medicine or with LSD or any other street drug, then what is actually happening to that person is they are being propelled off the tree of life onto the tree of death. It's a very simple way to look at it in terms of Kilthotic experiences. So it's like facing towards you there is the tree of life, which is everything that we know it is, and you can certainly find loads of information about the tree of life, and I've made films mentioning it and going into some detail about it before. It's got the 10 well-known stations from spirit all the way through to full material manifestations of the earth. So what happens in the case of someone taking a plant medicine, if they have an experience which they regard to be very disturbing, upsetting or challenging, what effectively has happened to them from a spiritual perspective is they have been knocked off the tree of life and onto the tree of death. Likewise, if a person experiences abuse as a child, it's exactly the same thing. They've been knocked off the tree of life onto the tree of death, and then wherever they go on that tree of death, they are experiencing the polar opposite. Now here's a completely different way of looking at it, which is, I've made a series of films, I think there's 3 or maybe 4 of them, and they're called the multidimensional universe. Now you might want to have a look at these because it talks about something called the lower astral realms. So this is a different map, if you like, and what that is saying is it's saying that we have the full physical realms, which is this, the physical body, 3D reality. We then have the first non-physical realms, which is very much to do with Santa Claus, the Tooth Fairy, and all the things that we can imagine. Spells with Harry Potter, whatever it is, as human beings are able to imagine and devote their thoughts to something that takes up reality in the first non-physical realms, and then beyond that we get the astral realms, and there's a whole series of astral realms, and the very lowest is what relates to what the Christian religion and some other religions refer to as hell. The hell realms. That's really what we call the lower astral realm. So this is really the manifestation of all the darkness that it is possible to conceive of. So if a person's having an experience with plant medicines and they are being given a Kilthotic experience, which means they're going through something which is very frightening and disturbing, what we learn about the plants is that they only do this for good reason. And I want to link in here with the New Age movement. The New Age movement was actually a very clever ploy on behalf of those that attempt to enslave and control humanity, because what they were saying is, let's deny the existence of everything dark and negative and just focus on the positive and say that's all there is, and there is no hell and there's no devil, there's none of these things, they simply don't exist. What an attractive philosophy that must have been for people, particularly in the 70s when it started to become a fashionable quasi-religion to follow. It seemed like, well, this is the answer, everyone. Let's meditate on crystals, go into the love and the light, and that will take care of everything. And I would argue that that New Age religion, which effectively is what it was really a reaction against what came before. So we are now in a time where we are being made aware that there is the totality of human experience. So the people who take plant medicines who have a challenging experience are those people who need to be aware of the darker side of life. And it's certainly the case for me when I had my first really strong experience with that brown plant medicine. It was actually my second experience. The first was very straightforward, lovely visuals and a simple purge through the mouth and the simple information. You do realize that with me you can reprogram your DNA, don't you? Very simple, takes me 10 seconds to say. But the second experience was when I found myself in tunnels under the ground, and it was back in the 1960s, very early 1960s, took me way back into the past. And I was on this slab and I was restrained, I was held down, I was about to be impaled by a metal object. Now, when I had that experience, I mercifully had done my 2 years shamanic training. I'd literally just completed it. So I didn't have the reaction that a lot of people might have had. It would have been very easy, you can imagine, to go into a big fear response with something like that. So I was being shown an aspect of the Kilthotic experience, the hell realms, if you like, the lower astral realms, and I was shown that because I needed to be aware that that was something I'd experienced in this lifetime. And the message really was, for me at that moment in life, this is where you are, this is where you live, move and have your being. So really what the plant medicine was saying to me is, it's saying to me, you're not even aware of the extent to which this horrific experience is underlying all your life and your experience of reality. So what we're going to do is we're going to take you there, we're going to show you really strongly and forcefully. Because I'd done my training, I didn't have an emotional reaction, I simply took it as an experience for which I'm very grateful. And it took me more than a year to integrate that experience and to understand why I was being shown that. So really that's the first lesson when it comes to Kilthotic experience with plant medicines, is when you have one, it will be deeply disturbing and unsettling, of course, and you may not understand it. It may take you time to understand what went on there. And if you need help, the best thing to do would be to find a reputable shaman and to do work with that shaman to help you to go into a series of journeys which would help you to uncover what all that was about for you, what its meaning was, what teaching was there, and what there was to learn from it. So I want to talk about something slightly different now, which is supposing we take on the example of the alcoholic. Someone that's been using alcohol for a very long time, they're completely immersed and enslaved in that experience, and they finally start to get what's called the DTs, or the delirium tremens. That's another example where a person's literally kicked off the tree of life onto the tree of death, and all that they see and experience in that state is horrific. So that's another way that you can see how this works itself out. In the case of a person who very, very rarely works with plant medicine, and then when the experience is over, it's not over, they're stuck in this awful place and it lasts and it goes on, then unfortunately what has happened there is a person has literally become detached from any form of connection with the tree of life, and they are literally stuck on the tree of death. Obviously, a person like this in that situation needs help from reputable qualified shaman to help them to find their way back to the tree of life. That will be an extremely important thing to do. So experience with plant medicines, what I would fundamentally say to you is this: the plants have always got an intelligence, and the intelligence is leading the person towards some kind of understanding. And in, I would say, 999 times out of 1,000, or even more so, the person finds their way back, and it's no problem. It's very effortless. And of course, it's very important that when one works with these plant medicines, to do so with a reputable shaman in a safe space, where the space is held, where the space is protected from negative energies, so that you know you're looked after all the way through. I would counsel against amateurish acts with regard to this, and I would say that that's going to be a good example how things might go into an out of control situation. So these plant medicines are not to be trifled with. They need to be taken with great respect and with all the support and protection and being looked after that what would need. It's rather like if you were to go suddenly to the Antarctic and you get out of an airplane in the Antarctic. You wouldn't go wearing what I'm wearing now. You'd go with everything you need, all the right clothing, all the things you would need to make sure you're well protected. And of course you would go with a guide, or you'd meet a guide when you arrived, and you'd have everything organized about where you're going to stay. It's the same principle. So very important to really do the groundwork and make sure that you're very well looked after. And also the other thing to say is, if in doubt, don't. It's a really obvious thing, isn't it? Right up until the moment where the choice arrives, when you're being offered. If you get a strong no, then follow it. Just state your no. And if you are ready for that experience, then of course embrace it with all the excitement, all the courage, and all the wonder that you can obtain from such an experience. So that's all I've got to say about Kilthotic experience in plant medicines. The plants are here to teach us, the plants are here to help us. Thank you.